Yeah, so excited to be here. Thank you so much for attending. So we have a panel discussion. It's really more about an organic conversation about accelerating your project, your ideas, how you're going to navigate and move forward. Some power tips are going to be disclosed. We have fantastic panelists. Let's kick things off and go with introduction. My name's Brandy Camacho. I'm with the Celo Foundation, Developer Relations.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eric Nakagawa, also with DevRel at Cello Foundation.
Hey everyone, I'm Ronnie Gore. I'm a partner at Flori Ventures.
Hello, my name is Alon Shavit, and I'm the program director and co-founder of Upright.
Hello, everyone. My name is Angelo Kalaw. I am part of the Research and Innovation Circle at Cello Foundation.
Fantastic. So, to start the discussion, let's kind of talk about the navigation. We look at it like driving. Like, let's look at it as driving. 0 to 60. There's in-betweens to get there. 60, you're ready to go to market and start deploying your application use case, your solution to the market. So 0 to 20, let's kick off. What's the best way to get started? Research and development. Let's use that as the theme for the 0 to 20. Angelo, you want to go ahead and kick that conversation off?
Yeah. There are many sources of inspiration, ideas, innovation, right? And one of the sources, of course, is like academic research or theoretical research. Like you feed an idea, people who were able to sit down on a computer and just think things through. And at the Cello Foundation, because we want to build the ecosystem, we want to have like a catch basin for different sources of these ideas and make sure that they're supported, especially like if these ideas kind of like shape the industry and kind of like, because we're at the frontier of innovation, right? So like we don't just identify one source of like, okay, this is where the future of blockchain will go, or like these are like the products and services that will emerge. And so in that light, research is very important. Even at Cello Foundation, we work closely with, of course, doers, but also thinkers and the academe and academic research. That's why I think this is a good opportunity. It was also announced in the panel downstairs. We're launching a program at the Cello Foundation. It's called Cello Innovation Scholars Program, where we will offer a total of $500,000 US in support of academic research. And so we're planning to support a cohort of 10 students / academic researchers who pursue research in blockchain and its applications. And each scholar for each cohort of every year, for each scholar of the cohort every year can receive between 20 to 50,000 US dollars in support for academic research. So we will hash out the details as it comes along, but our idea here is that research is important, and we want Cello to be also supportive of like the thought leadership. We want Cello to be a thought leader in shaping the space, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and really aligned with our mission of really like, achieving a financial system that supports prosperity for everyone. But yeah, like I think just like on a builder point of view, having this access to theory, to research, to academic research is very important and crucial.
Absolutely. And I love that. It's more opportunity to provide the research in the community to empower them to do new and innovative things in the space and share that knowledge, right? That's really what it's about. Eric, you do some amazing things in regards to the vision for hackathons. It seems like this is an evolution. Once you secure research and development, you acquire these ideas. How does that work in regards to the roadmap of hackathons, participation, so forth?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think some of the best hackathon ideas are often kind of grounded in research. And I also like building software. You can have a theoretical academic research, but applying that, I think, is where we like to spend a lot of our time. So for me, I think when I look at hackathons, they can be used as a way to attract new people into a particular ecosystem, and that's what we do at Cello Foundations. We try to incentivize ideas around bounties and things like that. For folks in the room, I don't know how many of you folks are already kind of building a company, but I would look at it also from folks who are kind of starting out as an opportunity to kind of try an idea kind of use a bounty. Some funny things I see in hackathons actually are if there's 4 bounties, their pitch is going to be they just string all of the bounties together, and they're like, "That's my idea," and I'm like, "That's not always a good idea," but I give them credit for like being ambitious. So yeah, I look at hackathons as a place to kind of like try things out. One thing I would look at is sort of that length of time, right? If the hackathon is like a weekend or a day, you're not going to get much done. But if it's like a month long, it's quite an investment, and I think it's often a worthy investment for teams or people who are trying to like find their idea. Many times, a lot of people who join a hackathon tend to be entrepreneurial. It's not always driven by just engineering. I would say like hackathons, you need at least 3 types. Sometimes they can be one person if you're a whiz, but mostly it's there's some business thinking, a design or some design thinking, and then engineering. And in some cases, it can be 2 people that split the work, or it flips around. But those 3 types I think are kind of core. And in many cases, when you do join a hackathon, more people is better. Having one person, it's very hard, but having a team of people, if it's a pair, a trio, or whatever the max capacity is for that hackathon, I think can be a great way to like just get a lot moving. And it kind of I'm not going to speak on the startup stuff, but I've been in the space before. Like if I see like 8 people in a team, I'm like, you're not going to ship anything. But if I see a sweet spot between 2 to 4, sometimes 5, it's okay. And again, I think it's a great way to kind of take ideas or problems, solve problems through hackathons. And oftentimes a business is just a solution to a particular problem. And it's a great way to get started. Yeah.
That's fantastic advice, yes. I personally have experience where I went into a hackathon. I thought having a bigger team would give us larger opportunity to secure interest, and I discovered that it crafted noise. And so it's interesting. And on that note, I would like to pass this question on to you, Ronnie, if you don't mind, is a lot of times these participants, they have fantastic ideas. They're so motivated. There's only so many opportunities the hackathon can provide. So they get told no, and feelings kind of get hurt. I've been there. It's kind of hard, right? You'd kind of question, was it a good idea? Did I do something wrong? What's your advice for those hackathon participants where they feel like giving up?
Just don't. It sounds very simple, but it's not. Feelings get hurt. We are motivated to succeed, and we want to get to milestones and quarterlies and yearlies and all of these metrics. And we almost forget that it's about the journey. And you will hear so many no's throughout your journey. And I come from Flori. We are a venture capital, and we say no. And to the people we say no, I will always say, come back in 2 months, come back in 3 months, go work on this and let's talk again. It's easy to kind of give up, but it's much more rewarding to keep on going. And I think what's beautiful about the Celo ecosystem specifically, but Web3 in general, is that there is an abundance mentality. It is not, I will succeed or you will succeed. There's literally room at the table for everyone. And my money, my CUSD is no greener than the other VC. And I think that the added value that we could bring to a company is crucial to your metaphor. The ability to kind of speed up or get to the next stage is what you should be looking for in your partnerships. So if someone said no, that wasn't the right partnership for you. There's someone else that can bring you the value that you are missing or lacking and can kind of complete it. And if you don't keep on keeping on, you will never get to that other yes that is so much more compatible for you. So the short answer is just don't.
Just don't, yeah. How many times have you taken a journey where it's just a clear direction, no stops, you made it? You always have to travel and take a break, obtain some feedback, right? And you should absorb this feedback so that way you can iterate effectively on your product, your solution, take it to the next level so that way when you try again, you're able to show that improvement. And I think that story too enlightens and inspires venture capitalists to be able to invest in your solution set.
Absolutely.
Yes. And with that, I would like to move on to Alan, if you don't mind. On the 0 to 20 stage here, you do a lot with Upright. Maybe you can share a little bit about your experience when it comes down to navigating projects to the next stage.
Yeah, sure. So Upright has two supporting programs for founders in the Celo ecosystem. One of them is Startup Pathway, which is do-it-yourself or an online learning experience for founders that are looking to do their first steps in the Celo ecosystem. So you can find a lot of helpful resources on how to build, how to think about your idea, team building. So I think this program is ideal for startups at their ideation phase. And then we have Cellocamp, which is a virtual acceleration and a mentorship program for the Celo ecosystem. It's an 8-week program where founders can expect to grow their startups together with us, to connect with other like-minded people, and to really prosper by increasing the impact on the world. So these are the programs that we support. And we really had the chance of seeing a lot of great teams coming through the program and then becoming big contributors to the Celo community.
Fantastic. So moving forward on our journey, now that we went 0 to 20, we learned the hard lesson that sometimes we hear no, and that definitely doesn't mean to stop, to iterate. Iteration is so important, and that's really what we're going to go to with this next stage, the 20 to 40. We want to get to the freeway on our journey with the project. Angelo, do you want to go ahead and continue that forward? What's your advice in regard to the next journey for projects?
Yeah, the other role that I do for Cello Foundation is pilots. So aside from, like, part of the ecosystem development of Cello is really helping builders do a pilot, right? Like an idea should be tested on the ground, especially like if you're developing a product or a service for the people. It can't be just a line of code. It really has to be, handled by someone, get you feedback or that. So at the Cello Foundation, we also engage with builders to pilot, to do strategic pilots. And I would say our strategy is twofold. Number one, of course, we want to develop use cases. We want to create like an evidence base that the technology is useful in the real world, develop those use cases. But number two also is like foster partnerships among different members of the Celo ecosystem. I think there might be a conception that when you're nursing an idea or like growing an idea, you have to do it by yourself. But I think the focus of the Celo community, and I think this is one of our strengths, which is like we have a big community that you don't know. Like another startup might actually be related to what you're doing, or like could amplify the value proposition that you're pitching. So pilots are necessary at that point. But then like pilots should also be done with caution, like with intentionality and foresight, like knowing what you really want to test, having focus on like the hypothesis that you want to bring on the ground. And then just like maybe a continuation of like being open to failure. Like your product might not work and that would be frustrating. Or your product may work and then you can continue on that next stage. And this is something that we do at the Cello Foundation as well. We've done pilots like the humanitarian transfer use case of like giving COVID aid to women in the Philippines affected by the pandemic in 2020. Just recently with Mercy Corps and the World Food Program on using Celo to pay digital micro workers in Kenya, those that are the young unemployed students. And so we were able to connect Corsali, who is now Vana, who like one idea, which is like providing machine learning jobs through their mobile phone and using Celo, and then connecting them to another member of the ecosystem, which is Kotani Pay, which is our off-ramp in Kenya. And then later on, connecting them further to DeFi applications so that the workers would have resources to use their CUSD instead of just converting it to fiat. So that, I think it's beautiful. Like I'm also amazed by it. Just like the idea of like leveraging on the different members of the community and testing with them and refining your product, I think is like a natural continuation, like from the idea to like getting it on the ground.
Yeah, well done. Inspiring stories and use cases deriving from the program. Excellent. Thank you for sharing. Eric, I would like to bring it to you. You have some experience here with investing in projects and working with projects. It's more than just hackathons. What's your advice when it comes to this next stage? Do you stop hearing no? Does the door just stay open?
So, I like what Angelo was saying about kind of partnerships and stuff. And the thing that like, I skew and bias heavily towards the engineering side. So like, you need to be shipping constantly. Like, it's hard to explain, but I meet a lot of projects that hit roadblocks, and I'm like, I'll give you time, but like, I can't keep giving you time if you can't figure it out. That's a bad sign, right? Maybe it's not the right thing. Maybe you need to take a step back. But I really like projects that just ship code, right? Like they just ship, and maybe they automate stuff and they figure stuff out. I've been on the receiving end. I've had a couple of companies before, and we were slow, right? We'd release once a week, and like that's old school. Nowadays, like you should be releasing constantly. And the reason I bring this up is I don't feel like, I know that the metaphor is kind of 0 to 60. It's more like when you're small and you're just a small team and you put your gas, your foot on the gas pedal, you can move and accelerate very fast. And as you grow, you put people into your car or whatever, again, metaphor, it'll actually slow you down, right? It should, it's just kind of like physics. But I like to see teams that ship. And I feel like shipping and iterating kind of go hand in hand. And if you find a point where like you aren't able to ship your idea, or it's sort of like when you can't communicate a message, when you're unable to kind of enunciate or kind of tell your story, maybe you have to think a little bit harder. And with products and especially with Web3, like there's no sleeping, right? Like I don't know who here yield farms or anything, but like if you blink, you lose the value goes down, you don't know why, right? So like if the world is not sleeping and you are not keeping up with that pace, I feel like you're not only gonna not speed up, you're gonna miss the whole bus, right? These things happen so quickly, and I hope even, we're still Celo, we still have values, but the world does not sleep, and I think if you folks are building your projects, like bias towards taking action. That's my main takeaway.
Yeah, well said. That's a big difference from Web 2, Web 3. Web 2 really had this pattern of a normal workday, slower progression towards iteration,
Yeah, well, I would say, I'm not saying like, work-life balance is a whole other thing for a maybe different conference,
Okay.
right? Like, but it does go hand in hand with running a company, right? There's no sleep. You're always going to be taking calls. You're talking to Flori. You're doing this. You're trying to troubleshoot the thing, the bug, this broke that. I'm not trying to scare you, but it's just a reality, right? You're running a technology company, and I think it's important to have a lot of energy. Maybe it's coffee. Maybe it's going for a run. Whatever it takes. But yeah.
Well, culturally, there is a difference from the Web 2,
Yeah.
Web 3 community. And I think it's pretty apparent, especially if you consider the difference between traditional finance and Web 3 blockchain. So I would like to move forward with Ronnie. Can you share a little bit more about your program? What are those pillars that allow for success for projects to navigate forward?
Absolutely. Like Eric said, it's not simple running a company, building a company, succeeding in doing so. So we have created these pillars at Flori that aim to support and bring value in the founder's journey, right? And founder's journey in companies are usually very lonely because they're very hard. And so what we've created are 4 pillars, and one is obviously has to do with fundraising. Not only by our checks, which is one thing, but also we have what we call our Demo Day program, which is somewhat like an accelerator program where we accept a few companies, and we really do a lot of work on all of the stages of fundraising, meaning it's not only pitching to someone else, it's understanding the founder's story and how that is translated and told, and really crafting that into the pitch we all know or the deck we all need. But more so, it's really connecting the right founders with the right investors. And we have seen very successful demo days, but I just want to really clearly say this. The goal is not a demo day. Your goal as founders is never just a day or one fundraise or one talk with one VC. I mean, you have so many goals and so many things to do. This is just one stepping stone. So this is just one pillar, the fundraising. And there are many others, and maybe I'll go into them later, but I think one that is really, really important, and the one we should be discussing, especially here at this conference, is what we call founders supporting founders. Because at the end of the day, this really lonely journey y'all are going through, others are going through it as well. And you would be surprised just how much knowledge and experience all of these founders have within them. And I see it as my greatest goal at Flori is to take all of these people and create some kind of sustainable, scalable connection, because the experiences and the knowledge within that network is what will help you succeed. We just wrapped up our Flourish offsite retreat for founders. So we took our founders 40 minutes away from Barcelona and just gave them a container to connect. And when you do these things, you don't really know what's the KPI here, right? When you fundraise, you know, I want to raise $1 million. Easy, not easy. It is what it is. But when we created this container, we didn't know what it would be filled with. And now, 3 days after, I'm walking around the conference, and founders have been supporting each other and collaborating and understanding that they either share a common goal or share an investment partner or share some experiences together and just create this bedrock of opportunity. So I encourage you all to look to your right and look to the left and understand that the founders within this room can and have the potential to be your greatest allies. And it's, like I said before, it's not one or the other. We all can make it. We all have room at the table. And I think as long as we create that network and that collaboration, we will get to prosperity for all.
Well said, well said. And I just want to emphasize, like, this is also the testament of never giving up and the power of having community, right? And to foster that community, to make network contacts that are meaningful to your vision. And that's why Founder's Vision is so important, because that's what you're latching onto as you're iterating through the development cycle of your product. With that, if you don't mind, Alon, why don't we talk a little bit about community and how we establish the roadmap there? How does that look for you when you're making your efforts building with the community of founders?
Yeah, so I want to elaborate a little bit about the importance of connecting with others in the ecosystem and collaborations that can be created. So in Cellocamp, we also created these concepts of guilds, where people can meet with others that are working on the same verticals. We see a lot of teams that are working on payments, creator economy, and DeFi, gaming. So definitely a lot of synergies can be created, and especially in Web3, where everything is much more like Lego pieces that can be connected together. So I can mention a lot of cooperation inside the Celo ecosystem, like Good Ghosting and Mula and El Dorado and Coco Mercado that are cooperating, and seeing all those beautiful examples of working together and collaborations that have been created in the ecosystem is just a wonderful thing. And also to touch on the personal aspect of being a founder. So being a founder can be lonely at sometimes, as you mentioned. So we also have a program that we created, which we call the Prosper series, that actually focus on self-help, and it's a wonderful series of yoga, meditation, and mindfulness classes to also help our founders connect to their own unique purpose, and to give them tools to deal with all the stressful situations that can come up as a founder. So I think providing people with all those opportunities and resources to connect with each other, and also to better help ourselves and thinking about our own health and balance, I think are super important.
Absolutely. You know, I personally had a challenge when I started my business. Like, I found it quite easy to iterate. I actually enjoyed that. I think, you know, as builders, we're late night coding, we're checking stuff out, we're making a product, and we're communicating. There's like this energizing factor of communicating in a community. That's why community is so important. Get those like-minded individuals to participate in your sandbox. But there's times where you hit a roadblock. It's like when we were alluding earlier about no, and to continue moving forward. It's like sometimes you're going to have to slow down because you need a pivot. And skill becomes an issue. And one of the hardest things that I personally experienced, and I learned the hard way, was replicating yourself. You know, I learned that I can't exactly replicate myself one-to-one. I need to break out the roles so I can have scalability come into my environment. Maybe we could shed some light on that. Ronnie, if you don't mind, you have additional pillars. What's your advice to help facilitate that next level where you need to go from, you're now heading on the freeway with the project and you're moving fast. At what point do you go, I need support, I need a scale?
Absolutely. So other pillars we have is putting the fundamentals. Essentially, when you want to scale, you want to make sure you have the infrastructure in order to do so. So, you know, one of our pillars is how to build a company, which might sound very simple or very complicated, but at the end of the day is very layered, right? You're building a company, but you're building a Web3 company, and you're building, hopefully, a Web3 company on Celo, right? So there are so many layers to this thing that you want to make sure you are either getting the best legal advice or the best tax advice, or just putting you have Web3 experts on your side, right? That you have the right tokenomics if you're launching a token. At the end of the day, if you kind of put some thought and effort, or a lot of thought and effort, into the infrastructure, you will have an easier time scaling, or moving forward, or, you know, going from 0 to 60. And another thing we're doing, and we just had a conversation about this earlier today, is what we call Cello Bridge, which is where we help our founders navigate the Celo ecosystem and understand what resources and what people and what ideas and notions and partnerships are out there in order for them to scale, right? Because all of us keep coming back to the sense of community. All of us keep coming back to the who do we partner with and how do we make this match? And at the end of the day, that is what it is. Because you can't do it just one person, right? You can't be a one-person show for your company. A, you'll burn out, and B, you won't scale. So I think just providing tools and means and infrastructures in order for you to be able to do that in the future is really important, especially if you are starting out. If you're just in the beginning of your road, if you're still in the 0 to 20s, as we say here, make sure you're doing that, because then the 40 to 60 will be so much easier. And I think it's all about who do you kind of surround yourself with. I think that at the end of the day, if you trust yourself, if you trust your team around you, your core team, it'll be easier for you to kind of delegate, let things go, and kind of ship, like you mentioned.
Yes, the power of iteration. And the challenges just never stop. And I think the challenges ultimately are a way to entertain yourself, right? To challenge yourself and do new things. Pivoting is very important. which reminds me about these hackathons. Like, we have a lot of fun with hackathons. These are like big opportunities to establish that network, to get accelerated. Eric, you just heard Ronnie talk about Cello Bridge. You had a conversation earlier. What's your advice for projects now that want to get started and they want to participate and navigate on that bridge?
Yeah, I think so. The funny thing is, at the hackathon that we had over the weekend, we had, I think, 44 teams participate, and I think half of those were in person. One of the teams who presented in this room, I think yesterday, the Node Wallet team was there, and I was like, I walked up to the team, I was like, what are you doing here? And they said, we just want to use this time to build an idea that we had that, was kind of like kicking around. And I thought, that's a great time to build something. I mean, hopefully they would open source their work, because that way, people could benefit from it. But I looked at that as sort of a forcing function for using a hackathon to build a thing. Many times you'll see, even with the foundation, when I worked at previous companies, we would have docathons and we'd have internal hackathons and things like that. The reason I think a lot of people got into this space is it's kind of fun and addicting, and you forget about it when there's like meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, and I got to meet this person, I got to do this, I got to run over here, get this coffee, and all that kind of stuff. And I think hackathons for some people can be a great way. It's also a great way to get practice for pitching an idea. It's fun even to just pitch random things, because it just keeps you kind of sharp. And so I've seen people kind of use it for, use hackathons for more than just participating and winning a prize. Prizes are great, don't get me wrong. Some of them are massive, and you should definitely participate in those. But if you do have a team already, Celo has a bunch of hackathons, some big ones coming up. We'll talk about those soon. But use those as like a forcing function to add a feature or maybe do something in the community, bring your team together to kind of like, it's still work, don't get me wrong, but it's a little bit more lower stakes than some of the day-to-day stuff. And I know I'm sitting next to someone who wants you to like stay focused on your project. It's just like, you got to let loose sometimes. And when you let loose, that's also where, I used to work at Meta. I only knew them as Facebook, don't get me wrong here. But they would have internal hackathons, and that was a very large source of IP generation. And so you can get a lot of patentable ideas when you bring people in a fun space solving problems that might not be their core problem. It also triggers, I think, a lot of cool ideas for products and features that, business is not linear. It's very non-linear. If I were to draw you my life chart, you'd be like, how are you alive? And I think many of us have a similar story. So I would say use hackathons as a tool. If you're starting, use it to start. But if you're already going, use it to kind of redirect some of your energy and anxiety into like building something that might be a creative solution to something else.
Yeah, good advice. Use it as a tool to inspire new use cases that you can build on top of. I was wondering, Alon, when you're working with your programs, how important is the vision for the founder as they navigate through these stages? Should they change or morph their vision, or should it be consistent?
Yeah, so great question. So vision is super important, but before you have a vision, making sure that you are building the right thing is super critical, and something that a lot of teams just get wrong, and then they waste a lot of time and energy on just focusing on the wrong things. So the advice here is to always be lean and to walk the shoes of your customers. That's a tip that I can't stress enough. If you're thinking about doing an NFT project, so try to trade some NFTs, try to feel the real problems that people have, and that could be a great cue for a project to pursue. And also, I think the conviction of a founder, really believing in what you are about to build and telling yourself, I'm going to dedicate myself to this mission and to this cause, because people underestimate the amount of effort creating a successful business takes. And if you won't have this conviction, you will be tested along the way. So definitely having a vision, and before that, making sure that that vision is something that is based on real world problems, super critical.
What's your advice on building a larger team with that vision? I mean, you've seen it many times. Maybe you can give a key takeaway here for others that are curious. They want to gain interest from participants.
Sure. So also being able, as a founder, to convey your mission and to create a great team around you, super critical. My advice will be to always find people that completes you in their skill set and people you enjoy working with. You're gonna spend a lot of time with those people. And super important to make sure that you also enjoy the way and that you can create really, really great companies and ideas together.
Yeah, Angelo, I was just going to come back to you. Go ahead. Yes.
I love what you're saying, and I'll add that a little tip for me is lead with vulnerability. When you're hiring, be very, very honest with what you're missing and what you need and what you're not good at or what you really hate to do. Not to scare anyone away, but just to make sure that whoever comes on board, like you said, either completes you or is just better than you at something. Like if you hire a team and you're the smartest person in the room, you made some problems hiring. Like you need to readjust. Try to hire people that are smarter than you, that are more capable than you at some things. And I think that a great little tool to use is when you're in the process, know that you're hiring someone who will automatically be better than you at something and will scale something for you. So it will make it better from day one, just because they have the skill set. And that doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong or that you're lacking. We're all different and we all have different gifts and different ideas. And I think at the end of the day, if you find a team that is kind of like a puzzle, each thing is completely different, but at the end of the day, the picture is beautiful. That's what you need. And to lean to my first point, if you be vulnerable about it, if you lead with vulnerability, both in hiring and in everything else you do, I believe that it will create really, really great results for you, for the team, and your business.
Wonderful. So I wanted to ask one more question because it totally relates, and I think your advice is going to be great for this question.
Now I'm scared.
Yeah, no, don't be. I just think it's important because I've personally felt these, and sometimes you get imposter syndrome, or you get this feedback, right? And it's throughout all the stages, even at the stage where you're moving really quick and you're trying to scale and you're vulnerable. You gave advice, and you might have said, "Hey, the product is great, but maybe you should do this. Maybe you should pivot here and there." And sometimes it might come off like a personal attack because you love it. It's like your child. You have your vision. You want it to go forward. Sometimes it's hard to get this feedback. What's your advice once you're vulnerable and you're receiving feedback? Maybe you don't like it. What's the best way to handle it?
First of all, I'm not always right. Maybe the feedback the VC gave you wasn't the right thing. But it really doesn't matter if it is or it isn't. I think the way we respond to feedback has a lot to do with kind of how we react in these vulnerable situations when we hear something that we don't really like. And I think what you need to remind yourself is that your investment partner and the founder, we're aligned. We want the same thing. We want to see this succeed. And we want to do it in the best way. Maybe it's not always the fastest way, but if you come from a place where you know that this person isn't against me, they just have a different opinion of how we both will get to this place we want to get to, I think it either softens the blow a little bit, or at least brings you to a point when you hear the feedback, you're a little more open to it, right? And you're going to hear so many things along the way. You're going to hear, do A or do B or don't do C, and pivot or don't pivot. And the tough thing about it is that it doesn't really matter what I say as your investment partner. Like, the decision to take this advice or not will always be on you, will always be on the founder. And that is why we talked about this earlier, that the journey is kind of lonely. because you're making those decisions. So I think if you come vulnerable, I think if you understand that expectations are aligned, the goal is mutual, no one is against you, then you might just be a little more open to either being very confident that what you're saying is thanks but no thanks, or very confident that, that's a better idea than what I had, thanks, let's do it that way. But I think if you come from this place, it's a win-win.
So remain open-minded and confident. That's the key takeaway. Amazing. Angelo, what do you have in regards to feedback?
Yeah, I want to build on that because I feel that, of course, feedback is important. I think it's the handmaid of innovation. It really like refines what we get from innovation and like finding something to scale. But there's some sort of like a method also to feedback, right? Like we just don't take feedback for feedback's sake. At least like our interactions with builders, those who are methodical about feedback, like get it, like think about or are intentional about the frequency of feedback, like how frequent do they listen to their stakeholders or like to their end users, but also the quality, right? Like maybe you were heard from that one person who gave that feedback, but then like you can think about like, okay, who are the other sources of feedback for me or for my company, and how much weight do I attach to that, depending on like the values that I believe in, right? Like maybe the feedback is like, this won't earn too much money, for example, but then you really believe that it will solve a pain point. And so like you go to that direction because your values say that you really want to, cater to like a pressing need. So I think at least like on our experience, of course, we find it that more builders are successful when they're obsessed with the end user and the customer. But then also like feedback should have some discipline, right? Like you don't listen to everything. You're not a sponge to all the thoughts, but you're kind of like systematic also, like which feedback is helpful. Because at the end of the day, you're the builder also. Like you have autonomy, you know what you're doing, and in the end, it's you who will write the code or like make the business decisions.
Well said. Well said. We only have a few minutes.
Yeah, I would like to share one kind of a bit of advice, which is when you're building your team, the feedback you get, you have to be real careful what you share and when, obviously. But be careful when people kind of just agree with you. I think that's such a bad sign. Or they're like, that's a great idea. Wait, that was a bad idea. No, it's a great idea. You got to make sure, like, it really comes down to the culture of your team. But I think harsh feedback is important, and it's important to break out of the cycle of people just, if you have a team that disagrees with you, you actually want some tension and some friction. I mean, you don't want it all the time, but like, it's also like, I guess my feedback is when you do get some of these harsh feedback from people outside, like share it, If it's something that is changeable, like a product response, like what's their thoughts? Many times I'll see some people, some founders that maybe I've advised before, and it's just like, they just go, and you're like, all right, some of them kind of take everybody's advice and they just go in a circle. So like you kind of have to figure out your own balance between being headstrong and like taking feedback. And I feel like that is more of a personal journey, sort of like where you're at. When I was 20, I also knew everything. And it really depends on sort of like the stage that person is at, their founder is at. And if there's a team, if there's co-founders, you're going to share that with your co-founders. When there's like a larger team and you're scaling, you got to kind of be more, I think, specific with who you share feedback with. But I think echo chamber bad. That's my TLDR.
I do have one very important question. I don't want to ignore the women in tech. I personally had a very challenging time in tech, growing, scaling, securing interest in a space. Hearing no hurt my feeling box so much. I wondered, was I in the right tribe? And then I started thinking about that. What does that tribe mean to me? What does that community mean to me? How do I build the resources necessary to take this journey to the next level? And Ronnie, this is really towards you because, you've certainly had to face some of these challenges as well. I always enjoyed converting them. Maybe you have some tips here that you can share to the women out there that might feel like, hey, this is such a big challenge, I'm discouraged. What's the tip?
Thank you for that question. That's beautiful. I'll share a story. So I mentioned that we created a Flourish, which was an offsite for our founders. but I actually had a very egocentric reason for doing that. And that is that being a woman in male-dominated industries, I would usually show up at conferences and walk into the room and was probably the only woman there, and usually the youngest. This was many years ago, and felt really alone and very out of place, and just felt that everybody was talking at each other. And I really couldn't comprehend what the hell I was doing there. And when I got into the Celo ecosystem, and I was actually on the calls that were like creating Celo Connect, I heard about how the Celo team wanted to create this container of connectivity and sharing and prosperity and just things that are so different from what I was used to. And I looked at it and I got inspired and I was like, okay, day before this conference, I want to take all of our founders and create a container that results in the fact that when they walk into the conference the day after, they know everyone. I saw her at the breakfast, I hiked with her, it was great, he was amazing, we have a partnership opportunity, and you don't feel alone. Because like we said, the founder's journey is lonesome, but when you're a minority, and that could be whichever minority that is, right? LGBTQ community, you could be a female in a male-dominated space, it could be a person of color, it really doesn't matter. I think my tip is to take that kind of soft spot, right, that maybe hurt you when you were younger or when you had less means, and work towards creating something that is the exact opposite. I sat on this panel, I said the words lead with vulnerability, I created a container in which I felt people can connect better. I took whatever hurt, or I took whatever I thought was lacking, and I tried to create different experiences. And they don't have to be big. They don't have to be sitting in a panel. They don't have to be off-site. They can be very, very small, like coming up and introducing yourself to someone, or making sure you're creating space that your ideas are not the only ideas or main ideas. And it's just this kind of acknowledgement and holding the space. I think even that just creates a huge difference.
So it's okay to be contrary to the trend.
Absolutely.
Love that. You know, there is an advantage. I mean, I remember attending several conferences, and I'm like, there's no line in the restrooms. Like, and Celo, with our events, because of the diversity, because of the inclusion, I see lines. I'm like, it's amazing. And I love seeing that evolution occur. And it's definitely more open and inclusive. And that's one thing that I personally enjoy about Web3. And Eric, I know we've seen it. We had our last hackathon, husband and wife just working together, taking on challenges. It's just so beautiful. We have them here with us today. Well done, facing the adversity and just continuing forward. And that's really the testament here on the panel. If there's a key takeaway, never give up, iterate often, be advantageous with your goals. You have a vision, remain confident. Someone tells you no, and you agree with them, pivot. If you don't, and your confidence is high, maybe you got to find your next tribe. Don't stop. That to me is just hugely important. I think I learned the hard way. I think I could have went faster if I was just more vulnerable and I was open to it. I was vulnerable. I just also had a challenge of not accepting it, I think. I think the space gives you so much in regards to challenges that sometimes we see these as hard walls that we can't overcome. And sometimes it's also okay to ask for a lifeline. And that's what's fantastic about having the panel here with us today. Like Eric, so good at making sure that we take care of various spectrums in the hackathon to give folks opportunities to participate. You heard Flori with the pillars available to provide not only inspiration for you to continue forward, but the support that you need to go across the bridge to take your project to the next level. And you have Upright, creating communities paths for you to make sure that you obtain the security that you need to remain focused with your vision. And then Pilots, research and development, Celo Foundation, inspiring us to learn and to share this knowledge, because there's nothing good about having a walled garden when it comes down to knowledge that would be beneficial for all. So with that, I would just like to say thank you so much. Thank you for attending today, and I hope that you found this session valuable. Thank you.
Thank you.